I'll start with you. How serious are these allegations against Simon Overland?
Well, they're important questions that need to be answered, and I don't think the Chief Commissioner has answered them thoroughly enough this week. Some are making the argument that these are old allegations, this was all aired last year. Well, fair enough, but I think what the Australian has done this week, it's actually done quite an interesting thing. They've brought in an outsider journalist, an award-winning journalist, a fine reporter, and they've looked over these issues again, and I think they've really come up with something that the Chief Commissioner has an issue to answer.
Okay, Stephen Mayne, there seems to be a missing link here that the Chief Commissioner couldn't answer. As you mentioned, it was a journalist who was working from Brisbane, I might add. The Chief Commissioner says that his reputation has been damaged through all this. Do you agree with that?
Well, the Australian has run one of the great campaigns of all time. I mean, I think it's been fairly vengeful journalism on the front page day after day. And you know, it troubles me a bit because the Australian has been in sort of legal dispute with the API and the Victoria Police. And so I've read all the allegations and think that, you know, okay, he probably shouldn't have you know, spoken to Stephen Linnell as he did. But Stephen Linnell was in on Operation Briar. He knew what was going on, and the bigger issue is with Stephen Linnell then passing on the information. And so, you know, the authorities have looked at it. They've said that it hasn't breached any of the relevant legislation. So I think we should just move on, and the Australians should drop their campaign.
Chris, what do you think about this? Is this something that newspapers, the media, should be following closely, the actions and behaviour of the Chief Commissioner?
Look, in my view, this is a case of office politics gone thermonuclear. And I think they should spend less time backstabbing each other and taking a close look at the crime rate. In a sense, we have a very serious problem with knife crime in Melbourne. We have a serious problem with assaults. It has impacted on us economically, it's impacted on the business community from the point of view that enrolment's are already down from Indian students and other students around the world. It has the potential to impact on Melbourne's reputation as a safe and livable city.
Ash, what do you think, though, about that? And do you think that we should be focusing very heavily on what the Chief Commissioner does?
Well, he's a man who has presented himself and does continue to present himself as squeaky clean. And if he was using information gained through telephone intercepts just to avoid an embarrassing item coming up on the rumour file, well, I don't think that's really quite appropriate.
It wasn't a good look.
It's not a good look. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a hanging offence. I don't think he should lose his job for it. But if he inappropriately used that information, then he should be reprimanded for it.
Okay, well, Chip Legrand is the Victorian editor of The Australian. I spoke with him a little earlier this week. Chip Legrand, thanks for your time. I'm going to ask you straight out, does The Australian have a vendetta against Simon Overland?
No, we don't. No, we have a very strong interest in what we think is a significant and important story.
But Simon Overland's defence to your reports is that it's old news, so is The Australian reporting something that's been around for a long time?
Certainly some of the material has been available and some of the material has been reported. What we've done, and particularly Hedley Thomas, who's our award-winning reporter based in Brisbane, what he's been able to do is go back through and, in a forensic way that hasn't been done previously, look at all the evidence, look at all the material that's come out of the collapse of Operation Briars, which was a 2007 police investigation into a murder, and a subsequent OPI hearing that flowed from that. And so he's been able to unearth material that previously hasn't been seen and subject it to a far greater scrutiny that's previously been done.
Okay, Chip Legrand there. Stephen, when you listen to him speaking there, does it start to make sense as to why it was important for this to come out now?
Well, not really. I mean, I agree that Hedley Thomas is a great journalist. He's won Walkleys, you know, Dr. Hanif and all that sort of stuff. And he has been quoting some other independent party. So that does give it some credibility. But I just think that the sheer size of the coverage and the treatment, page one after page one, has been over the top for the actual information presented. I mean, at the end of the day, Stephen Linnell was media chief. He knew about Operation Briar, and his police superior simply said, "You better watch this one." He didn't say, "I've been listening to this guy's phone," he just said, "Keep an eye on this one." And then it was Stephen Linnell who went out and talked to Noel Ashby and others.
But the issue that I found quite interesting attending that media conference was that if it was just The Australian that was putting up the argument against the Chief Commissioner, well, the Chief Commissioner certainly gave it back by refusing to answer, almost a farcical situation, the Chief Commissioner refusing to answer any questions. You don't often see that.
I agree, it was a ridiculous look. He should have just been bigger than that and actually answered the question. And you know, you don't particularly, as a senior public official, want to go to war with a newspaper. And he sort of started the war, if you like, when he was really angry with the Australians' original coverage of those police raids a year earlier. And I think, I've had plenty of wars with media bosses, and you don't usually win them. So I think that the police commissioner might have learned a lesson there, that to try and work with the media, and if you go to war with them, you might come off second best.